Started with House Transportation Public Safety budget. We've got two informational briefings today, and we will start with Secretary Zamuda with the Department of Corrections. Good to have you, Secretary.
On? Can you hear me all right? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Zamuda. I'm the Secretary for Kansas Department of Corrections. And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you here today to share a bunch of information regarding our operations, our agency, and what's going on. Before we get started, I've got three staff members with me today. I'd like to introduce some of them already. Keith Bradshaw is our Executive Director of Contracts and Finance. Chris Fanning, Dr. Chris Fanning, is the Executive Director over Programs and Reentry or Risk Reduction. And then our newest member is Jennifer King. Jennifer is the Executive Director of Public Affairs. She takes the place of Randy Bowman. Many of you were familiar with Randy. Randy retired last year, and we're fortunate to have Jennifer join us. So thank you for that. So I have a lot of ground to cover today. I'm going to move pretty quickly, but certainly either along the way or at the end, it's your pleasure, Mr. Chairman, and stand for any questions that the committee might have. Kind of the agenda items are going to talk about our population and projections, staffing and recruitment, what's going on there, parole and community supervision, some juvenile justice updates, talk about our physical plant and our facilities, information technology and security enhancements, some opportunities that we're pursuing for cultural change, and then incorporated in the presentation are the governor's budget recommendations that I'll touch on. So this slide summarizes the overall agency budget expenditures and a portion of the investments in juvenile and criminal justice here in Kansas. The greatest portions of our almost $538 million of expenditures in FY23 was for adult facility operations and medical care for our population in facilities. And obviously, KDOC is only a part of the costs of the criminal justice system. We have law enforcement, prosecutors, defense, courts, treatment services, and all our additional costs related to incarceration. A little bit about our adult facility population. That population has been increasing. The impact on of the coronavirus pandemic on law enforcement, prosecutors, and the courts resulted in a steep decline in our adult population during the pandemic, beginning in FY 2020 through FY 2022. Pre-pandemic, our adult population hit an all-time high of just under 10,100. That was in April of 2019, 10,100. Comparing June 30th, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, we experienced a nearly 16% increase in our adult population. So believe that the courts opened back up. There was a backlog sitting there, and we kind of saw a wave come in of the backlog. But since then, the last half of calendar year 2023 and early on this year, we've seen the population stabilize. We haven't seen the growth. Matter of fact, we've seen the population dip just a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what to attribute that to, other than I believe that the recent cyber attack on the court services data system has made processing people in counties, getting their sentencing all done, and getting them aligned to come in to the Department of Corrections. It may have slowed the flow. We're going to continue to monitor that. I think we'll know in the next 30 to 60 days as that court system is coming back up. We'll see if there's a backlog out there, or if maybe it's a new and encouraging trend that the population's down. We'll hope for the latter. So we're expected to exceed our existing bed capacity in the next 10 years. At the end of 2023, we were at 85% of our total bed capacity. That's those hard fixed beds that we have available. We have some beds closed, and I'll talk about staff capacity here in a minute. If future staffing allows and we're able to reopen our available units, we'll have sufficient bed capacity until about 2028 for our female population, until about 2029 for our males. So we'll need to be given some thought here in the next couple of years if the projections pan out to what we do to help increase capacity. So those capacity projections come from the Kansas Sentencing Commission, and this graph illustrates the projections for the overall adult population. The blue line that you see in the graph is the actual population. The orange line that graduates up is the projected growth in that population. And there's a gray kind of flat line that intersects with that orange line. That's where our current bed capacity is. So all things being equal, if those projections pan out, we're projected to exceed overall bed capacity around the start of FY 2029, which I believe is July of 28. Male bed projections, again, same color scheme on the graph, projected to exceed current available beds in FY 2029. This projection does not include a recently renovated 200-bed housing unit at our Lansing facility that we believe we're going to bring online the first part of February. The 200 beds associated with that unit will extend the ability to provide enough beds in our male population into calendar year 2030. So we'll buy a little more time with those beds coming online. Here's our female bed projections, and they're a little more aggressive growth in the projections than our male population. Again, expected to exceed current available beds in FY 2028. And if projections hold true, we'll need some new housing units before that time to accommodate that growth. I talked a little bit, there's bed capacity, and then there's our staff capacity, what we're about. And I used this slide last year. I don't know if I used it in this committee, but if you look at that image of those chairs, all four of the chairs would be our bed capacity. Our staff capacity is we're only able to staff the 3 chairs and not put somebody in the 4th because we don't have somebody. That kind of illustrates we have the beds, but we just don't have the staff to fill those beds. So it's important to consider both of those. If you reference the physical beds, the actual beds that we have versus the beds that we're able to staff today, and you look at the numbers that are on the slide, there's a difference of about 580. So physical beds are 10,459. We're able to staff 9,877. There's a difference of about 580. So we've got about 580 beds taken offline because we're not able to staff them today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about staffing. Our staffing pattern is improving. As our staffing pattern improves, we'll bring some of those units back online. We just reopened the East unit at our Ellsworth facility. That's a 95-bed minimum custody facility. Most of those guys are out working at our private industry program, but the staffing at Ellsworth had improved to the point where we thought we could do that, and we'll continue to bring beds back online as staffing, where and when the staffing improves and allows that. So there's costs associated with the increase in population. Medical and food services contracts account for about 20% of the agency's operating budget, pretty healthy chunk of it, food and the medical. So as our population dipped down, it was the right move to reduce our budget accordingly to the population. As it declined equally, it'll be necessary to increase those funds as those consumable items. There's a greater need as the population increases. And the governor's budget recommendation for FY25, you can see the recommendations. There's an FY24 cost of about nearly 80,000, 878, and then about 3.9 for food million in FY25. And for medical costs, the governor recommends 2.3 million in FY 2025. That food service breakdown for FY25 includes about $290,000 to replace worn and broken down equipment in our food service areas. Some of that equipment hasn't been replaced in 25 years. So there's a part of that cost is for equipment. Talk a little bit about staffing. So thank you for the investment that you've made over the past few years in our workforce. To help us recruit and retain people in our jobs. We're seeing a difference. We're seeing that investment pay off, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. But you'll see a graph here that really that investment is helping us a lot with our staffing. It has improved quite a bit. We've still got a ways to go, but it has improved significantly. And no matter what, challenges persist in this work. It's just the nature of the work. We have staffing challenges that have been inherent in corrections for ever, probably. We're a 24/7 operation. There's potential acts of violence, other serious incidents that really taken a toll on staff. Staff witnessed some pretty horrific incidents, and that cumulative toll that takes on them, you can't overstate it. So that comes with the job, and certainly that's not for everybody. Not everybody's able to manage that. And then we've had some new challenges in the past few years come forward. Not like everybody, unlike everybody else, certainly in the criminal justice community, but people wanting flexible work schedules, work-life balance, diminishing numbers in the workforce. All that, we're seeing that impact our ability to staff our work units. In recruiting, we contracted with a vendor, All-Star Talent. All-Star Talent has helped a number of corrections agencies and other law enforcement throughout the country in being more innovative in how they're recruiting and capturing potential candidates for jobs. We contracted with them. They conducted assessment, developed a plan. We're doing a pilot project at our El Dorado facility and our juvenile facility here in Topeka. We're about 45 to 60 days in on that. We're probably going to go another 30 days, and then we'll reassess, see how that's going, make some adjustments, and assuming it's going well, and it already is attracting a lot of people, but assuming it makes the right sense for us, then we'll push that out to our other facilities, and I expect we'll have the success that other DOCs have had. This graph reflects the adult facility officer trend, and really just the impact I think that compensation and probably some other things have had, but no doubt the compensation has. So this reflects the trending of uniformed staff vacancies in our adult facilities. And if you go to the far left of the graph, January 2022, the pay differentials were established to help stabilize our workforce, and they did that job. From that point on, by and large, we saw our vacancies either level off or start to improve. And then if you go over about the middle of that graph, there's a blue bar. That's when the latest round of pay increases from last year's legislative session were announced. They weren't necessarily on the paycheck, but they were announced and made public. And if you look from that blue bar going to the right, you can see our as those graph indicators go down, that means our staffing's improving, our vacancies are going down. So certainly appreciative of the investment in the workforce. This graph reflects staffing vacancies at our juvenile facility in Topeka. Maybe not as dramatic an improvement, but slowly and steady, we're starting to see things improve at our juvenile facility. And this slide shows that our adult non-uniformed, like our counselors, our maintenance staff, our admin support staff, what have you, in our facilities, that's holding pretty steady and has for some time. And then in parole, this is specific to parole officer positions. They've improved significantly since the end of last fiscal year. A whole lot better than we were year and a half ago. So we're doing well in those arenas. Not all the way there yet, but doing much better. Governor has some recommendations in her budget for state employees, for our budget. She's recommending a 5% base pay increase for all employees, all state employees. Proposal to address the 24/7 pay differentials, to make the first three, numbers 1, 2, and 3 differentials, incorporate those into base pay, and then the Department of Administration review and recommend new qualifiers or new criteria for application of differential 4. Governor's recommending bringing the minimum wage for state employees up to $15 an hour. That would impact 45 current KDOC employees, storekeepers, clerical staffs, custodians, library assistants, those type of positions. The budget calls for a $1 an hour premium pay for officers assigned to our tactical teams, who work in our restrictive housing, which is the jail within the prison for the people that are acting out and have disregard for the rules, maybe the most violent, disruptive, and then some pay for officers who demonstrate that they're proficient bilingually to help us in interpretation with our population that has does not speak English as a first language. And then finally, some funding to enhance the quality and the number and types of items issued as part of our uniform. Our uniforms just aren't what they need to be, and we don't issue a lot of stuff to our staff. They have to pick up the costs of that, if you will, and sometimes. So we're looking to enhance that. A little bit about parole and community supervision. Some of you that have appeared been on the committee for a while have seen this slide before. Just trying to explain, we have a trifurcated system that manages, supervises people out in the community. And if you look at the slide, and it's divided between three entities. So the box on the left summarizes persons on probation who are supervised by the judicial branch, court services officers, and they supervise persons with misdemeanor Kansas convictions who are assessed at low risk to reoffend, but convicted of a felony and misdemeanor compact probation cases. So that's administered by the judicial branch. The box on the right summarizes supervision of persons by the executive branch. Kansas, through the DOC, provides funding to local boards of county commissioners through a grant program, again administered by us, to operate local community corrections programs. Those community corrections programs, through their county employees, supervise persons with Kansas convictions for felony crimes who are assessed as moderate or high risk to offend. So they're supervising them on probation, if you will, out in the community. And then parole officers who are state employees, work for Kansas Department of Corrections, supervise persons released from Kansas prisons on post-release supervision. So that's post-1993 court cases. If it's post-1993, a part of their sentence is to be incarcerated and the other part is to be supervised out in the community. And if it's pre-1993, it's the traditional parole. Pre-1993, it's an indeterminate parole board, prisoner review board, sees them, decides to put them out in the community. We supervise them as well. No, those numbers are dwindling on that as the population aged out and we don't have as many people pre-1993. This is the individual supervised parole in the company at the end of each of the past few fiscal years on June 30th of each year. And I apologize for this. I don't have an answer for it. If you look at the abscond status, that's people that have kind of disappeared on us. We can't get them to report to the office. For FY22, we have an abnormally high number there. We have something with our data that I can't quite figure out. That number's not accurate, and I apologize to you for that. We haven't figured it out yet. But if you look at the other years, we're probably somewhere in that same realm. But that 752 number under FY22 for abscond status is not accurate. I don't know what the number is, and when we get it figured out, I'll report back when we know what it is. This slide reflects the most serious active offenses by gender of those being supervised in parole. So on the left, you'll see for males, other person, non-sex is the greatest percentage, followed by sex on a person pretty closely. If you go over to the right, that's females supervised out in the community under parole. Drug offenses for our women are the highest percentage, and then other person, non-sex crimes falling behind that. There's a number of individuals being supervised on probation by local government over the past few years. And you can see that dropped during the pandemic and has stayed fairly flat. And I know Mr. Regere's here, and he may talk a little bit more about numbers, but we'll see if that increases as law enforcement community, criminal justice community is opening back up after the pandemic. We may see those numbers grow. Some challenges for parole and community corrections. Really addressing the person's needs of the person who's being released is really difficult at best. There's just not enough resources out in the community. 22.5% of the fiscal year 2023 releases from our facilities went to homeless status, and solutions for housing in the community are limited. That's about a quarter of them that don't have a place to go. And I tell you, there's a number of great partners out there, shelters, nonprofits that just do a bang up job, but there's just not enough. And especially if you put a mental health component, a significant mental health component with somebody releasing, there's not a lot of places that can help manage or meet the needs of that person. So access to behavioral health services, treatment, medication, it's all critically important to public safety.
Secretary, we have a question.
You bet.
Representative Hoy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Do you have that by area and location where people are? Or does it tend to be that way statewide? Are there any areas that perform better for housing than others? Just would be interested in a little more information on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't have the numbers. We'll see if we can, I don't know if we can get it, but if we can mine that and get you those numbers, I would tell you generally, the more urban areas probably have more resources available. You get to the more rural and resources are just few and far between in some areas in general. The governor's budget recommendation includes $1.5 million for additional community corrections supervision officers and an additional $1 million for additional services to help them in their operating budget, whether that's providing more programming or what have you. Some juvenile justice updates. Our juvenile facility is the Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex, and this is a graph of the population there. It's declined significantly since fiscal year 2015. And the primary reason for that is passage in 2016 of Senate Bill 367, which better aligned juvenile justice system with evidence-based practices for juveniles who are justice involved. Senate Bill 367 devoted more resources to the community in order to divert lower risk youth from deeper involvement in the system, and certainly it's done that. The youth currently at KJCC are the highest risk and highest need youth in the system. In this data, 11 of the youth were females and 130 were males. So this is the population by age as of June 30th. 91% of the youth in the facility are over the age of 16. 64% are over the age of 18. The average length of stay for our girls there is 422 days, and for the boys there is 401 days. That length of stay and their age is important because our services really need to reflect the needs of that population, such as education, job skills. They're old enough that when they get out, they can get into the workforce. So we're placing some emphasis on that. Initiatives at the facility. Practices in juvenile corrections continue to change as we increase our understanding of the importance of strengthening connections with families and the support systems. Super important for those young people. As we do, we need to change our practices and that have created barriers between families and their kids. And so at KJCC, we've implemented several changes. We've created a quarterly newsletter to communicate with families. We have a new parent caregiver orientation. We have family meals at visitation. So if someone's up visiting their child, they can share a meal in the dining with them. Free video visits for the kids with their families to stay connected. We have a high school open house and then family therapy. Another change is, and I mentioned the need for job skills, is to increase our focus on employment skills and assistance with obtaining employment upon release. Again, it's critical given their age and their probability of joining the workforce. This includes a collaboration with the Kansas Department of Commerce, that increases public safety and contributes to the economic needs of the state. We've added a workforce specialist located on the KJCC campus, and that person's working to increase employability skills and job retention skills. In addition, we have JAG-K. They've partnered with our high school at the facility, the Lawrence Gardner High School, to focus on this same need for the residents by adding a career specialist that we now have on site and teaching those employability skills, career, and leadership development. And then finally, our staff training is an initiative. We're doing mental health training curriculum for juvenile justice, helping our staff better understand the needs of those youth, and then an emphasis on verbal verbal de-escalation techniques to help manage the population when they're elevated. Some more initiatives in juvenile services, the Stepping Up initiative, that's funded through the evidence-based program account that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We also have technical assistance from the Council of State Governments, and the goal is to work with youth with mental illness to divert them from detention with access to community services. Kansas represents the first expansion of this work with juveniles in the country, so that's pretty cool. Pretty excited about that. Again, family engagement, finalizing a new community supervision standard as guidance to community corrections agencies for family engagement, providing training for community corrections and other community partners on that. We have House Bill 2021 passed, directed KDOC to provide more frequent grant opportunities through the evidence-based programs account, rolling grants, if you will. I don't think we're quite to rolling grants now, but we've enhanced the frequency and the timeliness of those grants, and we're just going to keep working to get to where, as that money's coming back in or it's not utilized, we can push it back out in other forms. Talk a little bit about physical plant at our facilities. So brief overview of what's at our facilities. So we have two funds for repairs and maintenance. We have the Correctional Institutional Building Fund. That's for our adult facilities. That's the top portion of your screen. And then we have the State Institutional Buildings Fund. That's for our juvenile facility. When you look at the numbers over to the right, we have a number of buildings. Between the juvenile and the adult facilities, we have nearly 4 million square feet of buildings. That's space under roof. That's a lot. We had an assessment and some estimated costs from a national vendor, Carter Global Lee, and you see some of those repair and replacement costs and assessment costs for the deferred maintenance, and those are figures that they provided for us. So additional funding for facility repairs. That facility assessment report that Carter Global Lee did for us was completed in the summer of 2022. And it looked at repair and maintenance needs of our 254 buildings, 254 of our buildings, which have approximately in our adult facilities about 3.6 million square feet. Age is a primary factor in the finding of 338 million in needed repairs. Another is that funding provided for these repairs is not kept pace with costs. Money for the repairs to our facilities, for our adult facilities, comes from the Correctional Institutional Buildings Fund. I referenced that on the previous slide, which since 1997 has been funded by 10% of receipts, not to exceed $5 million, from the State Gaming Revenue Fund. That number was decreased just slightly to $4,992,000 in 2001. So since 2001, we've had just shy of $5 million to address repairs and maintenance at all of our adult facilities. 3.6 million square feet. Between the increased age of our infrastructure, and it's getting aged, and reduced buying power each year, we've just fallen farther and farther behind in our ability to stay up on the repairs and maintenance that's required. Last year, the legislature provided a one-time allocation of an additional $4 million in addition to our existing nearly $5 million to help us start addressing that $338 million need. Super appreciative of that. And if you look on the slide at the column on the right, under Topeka, El Dorado, Hutchinson, and Larned, that's primarily where that $4 million is being allocated to. It's much needed, and we're very appreciative of it. Really helped us address some needs. So the governor has some recommendations for capital improvements. construct a new medical behavioral health support services building at our Topeka Correctional Facility. That's our female facility here in town. That's about $40 million. That facility would would centralize our visitation and staff entrance. The current healthcare space is insufficient for the physical capacity of 936 women. When it was built, I believe our population was half that many. It was like in the 450, maybe 460 range. The infirmary lacks isolation rooms and has only one crisis level cell for behavioral health when someone's in crisis. And really, the infirmary is just substandard compared to our male facilities. So that's what that building's about. The other capital improvement in the budget is replacement of the Hutchinson Correctional Facility in Hutchinson, Kansas. That's about $378 million. The original part of the Hutchinson Correctional Facility was constructed in 1867. The central unit has no air conditioning. The central unit's the primary, the big, if you've ever been to the facility or know anything about Hudson, the big stone central unit facility. It has no AC. We have some cells that are way small, too small to be housing people in. They don't come close to the American Correctional Association standards. The facility is not compliant with the American with Disabilities Act. We're grandfathered in because it was built so long ago in a lot of instances, but nonetheless, it's not compliant. The east and south units, which are a little bit lower custody than the central units, are of wood construction and lack sprinkler systems. Again, we're grandfathered in. We have a 24-hour presence there, but still, you'd prefer that they have all that. So the assessment from our vendor indicates that bringing the current facility up to standard is cost prohibitive, and they recommended replacement. We had it in our 5-year capital plan as something that was going to be an ask next year, and with the state of the budget, it got moved into this year's budget recommendation. Some other projects, we have some demolition of a couple of honor camps. The north unit near El Dorado and the east unit, Toronto Lake. Those are two ongoing projects to raise those building structures that are there. They've not been in use for several years. They've fallen into disrepair. The one at East Unit, the North Unit is nearing completion. We're grateful for the funding to do that. It's a long time coming. The one at Toronto Lake is on property that is managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they have to weigh in and give their clearance, and it's just taken more time than we'd like. So we're hopeful we'll get some movement on that and maybe could finish that out, hopefully this fiscal year. Oh. Some images of our minimum custody unit at the Lansing facility that came online in 2020, I believe. So since opening that minimum unit, and it's part of the newly reconstructed facility that we built there. But we've had a couple of individuals walk away from the facility. We've had some problems with private parties up on the perimeter trying to introduce contraband. Not good intention. So we felt we needed to get a fence around that as a barrier and some lighting. So that's what that project is. It is completed and we're in good shape there. We brought a facility online in March of 2023 at our Winfield facility. It was a building that had been belonged to the veterans that was underutilized. They transferred it to us. It's designed as a long-term care, nursing care facility. We brought it online. Governor recommended, legislature funded some money to renovate it and get it up to speed. And so we're using that facility for our geriatric population, those with maybe acute care needs, those with cognitive care needs. We're seeing more of that in our population, whether it be dementia or Alzheimer's. It's been a great success, been a great facility for us. You see it more and more nationally that there's a greater need to meet the needs of that geriatric population outside of the normal population, and especially cognitive care, stuff like that. And we're fortunate to have that facility here. We're one of a few corrections agencies that have a facility like that. This is an images from that Winfield unit. And again, it's very much the design of a long-term care facility.
Secretary, Representative Delberdang has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I've got other questions I'll get you later on, but specific to the geriatric building, I toured that thing when it first opened and it was really nice. Is it being kept up or is it getting kind of tore up with, how is it being treated? I'd just like to know. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, great question. I haven't been down there in a couple, 3 months. It is a concern. You're going to have to stay up on it because you've got 242 men in there, and there's some carpet on some of the floors, and a little bit nicer finishing. So one of our points of emphasis is to keep that maintained. We have to. We can't let it denigrate. I haven't been down there in a couple, 3 months, so I haven't seen it lately. But it's point of emphasis when I go down there and look at it. Good. Okay. All right. No, you're good. Oh, the other thing we got from the Winfield unit was we were trucking our meals up from the veterans home, and we had residents down there working in their kitchen, helping prepare meals. We the funding provided for a new dining and kitchen facility on our grounds, and it created that separation, which I think is much needed there. So we're very grateful for that. That's working well as well. Working well, also. So. Another unit that was funded some time ago was to renovate an old existing housing unit up on the hill at our Lansing facility for the purpose of substance abuse and work opportunities, about 200 beds. That work is completed. Our staffing is improving at Lansing to the point where we believe we'll be able to open that unit in February. Again, it's about 200 minimum custody, maybe even work release beds for guys that need substance abuse programming and need those opportunities to get ready for work. And so there's some images of what that unit looks like. And that's quite a different look for us, much like that long-term care facility. It's not you're trying to create an environment that promotes change and gets people feeling good about changing their lives and getting on. So, and we invite you to come see either of those units or any other units anytime. Doing some work with our information technology, both in terms of some security measures and some enhancements. And I think what happened to court services is a good warning for all of us. So we've done some security enhancements. We've replaced dated switches and servers, some of which were no longer supportable and potentially unable to withstand efforts to compromise our system. So we've done a lot of replacement of that equipment. We're also, and I'll talk about it here in a second, we're also we've brought up some Wi-Fi networks for both staff and the population, and we're modernizing our data systems. Athena is our data system project, multi-year, been going on, and again, opportunity to take some systems, some of which were from the 1970s, that nobody really knew how to put a patch on or fix, and modernize it and get us in the modern age. Our partner with that is Microsoft. We're intending to we think we're going to be able to bring the full system. Part of it's online already, phase 1. We believe we're going to be able to bring phase 2 online in May. The governor has a recommendation to retire the financed obligation associated with this project, which is about $6.7 million. The current payment schedule places payoff in October of 2026 or fiscal year 27. So it's about $6.7 million to just pay that off and settle the debt. I referenced staff and resident Wi-Fi. Our Wi-Fi projects for staff allow them to be more efficient, more mobile, more effective in their work. Be able to literally take a laptop or a tablet and go sit down with the resident, and whether it's programming or whether it's a property inventory, just do it real time. Really excited about the potential that that's going to do for us. And then for residents, we've got Wi-Fi and we've got one-on-one tablets. Our vendors supplied a tablet to every resident. That's at no cost to us. That gives them opportunities to do their study hall work for their education, or if they're working on a work skills opportunity, to communicate with their families in a better way, to manage their fund accounts, order their commissary, what have you. So we're really, and do that from either their cell or in their living unit and not have to go to a designated kiosk. So that's a game changer for our population. Opportunities for cultural change. Got some initiatives that we're getting going in our adult facilities. improve practices and processes on how we manage our population. We need to modernize these practices that you see on the screen and bring them in line with best practices. And so the disciplinary process for our population, restrictive housing processes and practices, and then our grievance process. So we've got work groups that'll be working on those. Another game changer is Pell eligible programs. Many of you have heard me talk about this a couple times, but it's just exciting. In recent times in our facilities, we've been limited to just GED or high school diploma completion, and maybe a few vocational certificates or CTs, and that was really exciting and real cool. But this opportunity for Pell dollars has really just exploded and opened that all up. Changes in the federal law have really made those dollars available to the incarcerated population. So in late 2019, with our higher ed partners, we established the Kansas Consortium of Corrections Higher Education here. We had 9 college partners engaging in an agreement to provide high quality post-secondary education programs in all 8 of our adult correctional facilities. All 8. And in 2023, we added a new partner, Wichita State University Tech. At the end of the 2023 academic year, our college programming included 2 bachelor's degrees. You could get 1 of 2 bachelor's degrees, 1 of 14 associate degrees, and 6 professional certifications. I think this slide really illustrates what a game changer it is for us. If you look on the left, that's 20 years from 2001 through 2020. And you can see the number of students and degrees awarded. And on average, how many students per year and how many certificates per year. You move over to the right, in just 3 years, the last 3 years, it's just exploded. On average, we've gone from 375 students a year to 653, and I just expect that to grow. 274 degrees and certificates compared to about 37 per year. I'll talk about more about the benefits of education here. 90% of our current residents will return to the community. Those who achieve a sustained livable wage upon return to the community from prison are 1/3 less likely to return to prison if they can get that job that pays a sustained wage. That's the single greatest number I can give you. If we can get them prepared to get out and hold a good job that pays a good, decent wage, 1/3 of them that return today will be less likely to come back to prison. When they have that job, it's not just the money, it's they're engaged in pro-social activity around other pro-social people. It gets them in a different crowd. Substance abuse and addiction is buffered. They're busy working. They're not off idle time, in despair, using, and then their family needs are met and family relations are a lot stronger. So we have this education plus the employment. We need to work more on the employment, and we've done some things. So we have facility work assignments, which are grounds maintenance, building maintenance, working in the kitchen, that type thing. Have plenty of those. We have traditional industries, which is our traditional correctional industries. We have a paint plant, a welding plant. We have private industry partners. We have about 40 private industry partners statewide. And I think we have about 1,200 people engaged in those. Those are great work training opportunities. And then we have work release. Our primary work release today is only in Wichita. In our 5-year plan, I think we've asked for 3 additional work release facilities. So in work release, somebody's out working in the community. They come back at night. They're paying their fines, fees, restitution. They're saving money. They're getting ready for that release, and it connects them to the community and gets them kind of decompressed from prison life to community life a little bit more. So one of the things we're lacking on this education effort is space and the right type of space. We do not have enough of the right type of space to meet the capacity and to do it in a good way. I think we do a lot of it. We do a lot with education. Our people are creative and they're innovative, but oftentimes we're trying to teach people in a room that's noisy, it's crowded, it's not well lit, just not well ventilated, not a good environment. So we've had a vision for a while to create a career campus, and we're going to start at our Lansing facility. having a career campus creates enough of the right type of space, we believe, to make education and work training opportunities even more exciting for our population, motivate them, and then have the right space to do it. So in 2021, House Bill 2401 established a framework for a public-private partnership. It allowed the Secretary of Corrections to form a nonprofit entity for the purposes of seeking financial support from foundations, private donors, nonprofits, what have you. We formed that nonprofit. We engaged with a contractor who knows about fundraising. That's not our expertise. They know about fundraising. They went out, did a pre-campaign study on fundraising to identify, how much interest would there be in partnering with us on a career campus. The study indicated that there is quite a bit of interest out there, but that those investors would like to see a commitment on the part of the state. They believe that that's necessary, and without that investment, we might not be able to engage those folks. So in the governor's budget recommendation, we believe it's about a $40 million project. In the governor's budget recommendation is $20 million to leverage and match donations from the community. So beginning in early 2018, we partnered with the Kansas Children's Discovery Center, and you see some images here, to begin a partnership to create an opportunity for our residents at our female facility here in Topeka to bond with their children, stay connected with their kids. It's grown into 6 online on-site events at the Discovery Center, hosted each year. And it's just a fantastic program. It keeps those mothers connected to their children. Doesn't matter how old they can, and if they have 5 kids, they bring 5 kids, no matter what their age. And when you go and you witness it, it's pretty powerful. We know that incarceration often takes a profound toll on families, especially the youngest and most vulnerable members. Having them stay connected to their parents, not only maybe helps that person that's incarcerated be motivated, because they have to stay disciplinary free to be part of the program. Their behavior has to be right. Not only it motivates them, but it can help break that generational incarceration that happens. Those young people often make their way into the criminal justice system and whatnot. So we're hoping that it helps break that up. So we're looking to expand that program to our juvenile facility and our adult facilities, and also do some things with our visitation to make that more interactive, to help better connect them. So in the governor's budget recommendation, there's $224,000 to expand the program and our partnership with Kansas Children's Discovery Center. Another thing we did this past year is the Gift of Chess. Their Gift of Chess is a nonprofit. They're an international organization. They reached out to us and said, "Hey, would you be interested in us helping organize getting your population introduced to the game of chess and helping organize tournaments? We believe it helps them train their mind, be more disciplined. And many of our people, they're impulsive. They're not very disciplined. They don't think before they act. You certainly, if you're going to be a decent chess player, and I don't count myself in that category, but if you're going to be a decent chess player, you can't be very impulsive." So we welcomed them in, really had a lot of enthusiasm amongst our population, held tournaments statewide, participated in a national tournament online with some teams from us, and just a very exciting event. We're going to continue that partnership. Again, it's a very pro-social, very meaningful activity for our population, we believe. Trying to do some things with our restrictive housing population, have an incentive program that we're getting going. I referenced earlier, restrictive housing is the jail within the prison. When you're disruptive, you're violent, you're a problem person, you're probably spending your time in long-term restrictive housing where you're locked down almost all day for most of the day, just because you present a threat to either yourself or others. But we've got to find a way to work those people out, try to find a way to motivate them and get them back out into our general population, because that long-term restrictive housing can be detrimental on mental health and a lot of other ways. So looking for ways to motivate them, provide them some opportunities, incentivize positive behavior, provide clear expectations, some positive reinforcement. You see some programming chairs out there in the image on the tier. That's bring them out. They're normally in restraints. Put them in the chair, take the restraints off. There's a way to restrain them by the legs. And that way they can have some social interaction. They can be engaged in programming and just start that decompression process, working them back towards general population. I referenced earlier, most residents are going to return to the community. There's a misconception that people just go away to prison, remain there. People dust their hands. Hey, done with that. They're gone and not forgotten. That is simply not the case. Most residents leave incarceration and return back to the community, 95%. So if you look on the slide, many of them aren't with us for very long. 66% serve less than 5 years. They become our neighbors when they release. They're going back to their community most of the time. And what do we want that to look like? That's our job. We have the incarceration piece, which is important. They've hurt people. They need to be removed from society. But then we're charged equally with, we got to turn out a better person than we received. So providing the skills and opportunities for them to be successful really contributes to good public safety and better communities. A little bit about successful reentry and what that might look like. We really need to tailor programs and services to the unique needs and risk factors of each individual. That's best done through an assessment, determining what their needs are. Our support services need to be holistic in nature. Addressing only one need at the expense of the others really doesn't get us the intended impact. So, for example, if we help somebody with employment, but we don't find a way to help them get into some housing, the prospects of them keeping that job probably not very good. So trying to find ways to meet all their needs. Family support and systems matter deeply. I referenced that earlier with our juveniles, just keeping the family. That's most people that are successful make it, have people out there that can help them along the way. And then one specific type of intervention that literature's found to be effective in supporting successful reentry is cognitive behavioral therapy, trying to get them to change their way of thinking. So we're placing an emphasis on that. And then community supervision when they're out in the community, if on parole, if you will. It can't just be about surveillance and catching people doing something wrong. We've got to take a more active role, and we are taking a more active role in helping support them and guide them. This is how you'll be successful. This is what you need to be doing. So we call it coach versus referee. It's easy to be a referee. It's a lot harder to be a coach. Maybe not easy to be a referee, but maybe that's easier than being a coach. What's needed inside our facilities? We've worked diligently the past 2 decades to embed recommendations of research into our day-to-day practices, and building stuff to scale requires an investment of what is demonstrated to work and build capacity so all of our residents that need it have those opportunities. And again, research helps us understand that those who achieve that sustained livable wage employment upon return to the community are 1/3 less likely to come back to prison. Last 5 years, we've been able to help between 236 and 399 residents per year achieve their GED. That's pretty exciting. We're excited about that. What's needed in the community? Really services and opportunities to help support success and reduce. That substance abuse and mental health services, I don't need to tell you, you've probably heard it time and again. They're just lacking out in the community, particularly, and I'm not the expert on it, but particularly maybe in the more rural communities. Some of those services are a long way away, and it's just hard for people to access them. Safe, affordable housing, especially for those high needs people, and I referenced folks with significant mental health needs or maybe disabilities. They're hard to place. Expand employment for persons with criminal records. I think that's getting a lot better, and I think in part because of the workforce shortages. I think employers are rethinking to some degree whether they'll give somebody who has a criminal record an opportunity, and so we just keep advocating for that. I'm almost there. I think. Oh, go back. So let me say thank you. These are images of our staff. Again, I want to thank you for your support and your investment in our workforce. It is making a difference. no doubt about it. We have fantastic employees. I'm proud of their service to Kansas and communities and for their willingness to try to help people change lives. They really are changing lives. And I'm very proud of them for that. I want to thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to appear before you today, members of the committee, and share this information. And I'm certainly stand for any questions you may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Appreciate your testimony. Um, I I always praise your whole team on partnership with private business. I think it's phenomenal. I've seen it at a couple um, of your places. Education and more program. I mean, the chess deal that you guys implement. That's a neat idea as well. This all goes to help the recidivism rates. Do you know surrounding states where we rank or across the nation? Do you know where we're at?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I apologize. I haven't looked at that late. I know that our recidivism rate last year, I believe, was 27 or 20, about 27%. Now that's lower. Typically, we've been in the low to mid 30s. So I don't know if that's an anomaly. I'm not quite sure what's driving that, but I think we were at 27th last year, and I would imagine that we're probably in the middle to upper half in the nation with that kind of a recidivism rate. Typically, you see it in the 30s to maybe low 40s in systems.
Very good. And I had one more, but I'll find it. Any other questions from the committee? Representative Ford. Representative Carr.
It's okay. The second time today, someone did that. Question uh, with respect to the medical costs. If we go back to, I think it's about the fourth slide or something. That you had a second, third, somewhere in there. Would expanding Medicaid cause that number to decrease at all, or would you have that information or knowledge?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yeah, yes, it would. Keith, you know the numbers? Okay. Well, if Keith can grab those numbers before we're done here, we'll share that with you.
And I've got a second question as well. When we look at the dip in the population that occurred at near or around that COVID timeframe, was that specifically because we had postponed or eliminated the court proceedings, or was there something else that was integral to that particular drop in the population? And I'm just curious, um, how we managed that at that time, if in fact, or do we have that data that dictates specifically what was directly related to that drop in population?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't have any data. What I have is what I've seen and heard and what I believe. So it's anecdotal. So I think when COVID hit, the courts kind of had to really curtail doing business. So it created a backlog. I think law enforcement also started making some different choices because the jails were full. So maybe there was more diversion or more other opportunities to keep from just overwhelming system. The courts were not, I wouldn't say they were completely dormant, but they were certainly scaled back for quite a while, months, if not a couple years. And just as we came out of as the pandemic kind of went on the wane, then the courts opened back up. And you saw our population start to rise. And I had talked to county sheriffs and they would tell me, yeah, we have a backlog of people that'll be coming to you once their case is adjudicated. A lot of capital crimes, murder, if you will, just kind of sitting there. So I think it's a combination, my belief, it's a combination of the courts having to scale back during the pandemic, and then maybe law enforcement, maybe I think they still arrested people on the most serious crimes, but maybe some of the other stuff they and prosecutors maybe found some diversions as opposed to coming to court. That's my take on it.
Thank you. I would that would be my guess as well. And I don't know, Mr. Chair, if there's any way we could extrapolate that information. Uh, I find it interesting that the state didn't fall apart However, we elected to not incarcerate quite as many people. Um, and I'd be interested in getting some additional information so that we could look further into that, and that might be another way um, we could head off some of the potential overpopulation situations that are planning to occur. If I'm looking at the data correctly, it's going to say that we'll be out of beds, and I believe it was 2028 or something of that matter, to that nature.
Yeah, I'm sure research and Secretary and Department of Corrections can help get you some answers there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, we'll do our best to see what we can come up with and see if we can find some numbers that make sense.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Delberdane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had the same question the previous rep did here, but maybe a different twist on it. But we all know there was a judicial system backlog 2020-23 timeframe. My understanding, Sedgwick County was pushing some cases through. Johnson County was pretty much shut down. But as that turns around, are we going to overwhelm the prison system population? Is there still a bunch in this backlog that you're aware of?
Yeah. Now, Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's a great question. I can't find anybody that has the answer to that. But here's what I think. We saw a wave of pretty significant increase at one point for about a 6 or 7 month stretch. We were growing at about 67. Our population was growing at 67 adults per month. That's a pretty rapid pace. That happened. So the pandemic kind of goes on the wane. We see the courts open back up, and here we start to see our population for almost a year, better part of a year. Then it starts slowing down a little bit. And now, and again, I don't know if it's because of the data system in the courts being down or if it's just the new trend. It is pretty stagnant right now. Very stagnant. Matter of fact, it's dipped just a little bit. I think the Sentencing Commission also projected it might dip in 2024. So we're just going to kind of take a watch and see. We're certainly not the growth that we saw. And the answer is, I think that wave that was in the backlog, I think that's come and gone. I believe that's come and gone. I'm hopeful of that. And now we're back to whatever the new normal kind of is. So it'll bear watching the months ahead.
Can I continue? Okay. You hit on most of the questions I wrote down. I just had a couple more, but you touched on Senate Bill 367, which was introduced in 2016, reducing youth incarceration. But I understand there's been some recent updates by Representative Owens with the Corrections Committee. Has that affected that any? Is it still are we still seeing a good reduction, or is it maybe turned around due to recent changes?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, so I think what you're referencing is maybe House Bill 2021.
It carries a new bill,
and I
but
think
it was
what
based
that
on
allows
that.
is for some of that money in that evidence fund to maybe be used for some youth that aren't all the way into the criminal justice system, but are at danger of, and to try to divert them. And it's too early to tell what that might mean. But we've not seen our population grow in the youth. It's been pretty stagnant the last 2-3 years, around 141, 142, something like that. So we're not seeing growth in the juvenile population today. That's for sure.
Okay, and then just minor. Base last one was a comment because with the Pell Grants, you touched on that. I know the community college presence has been a really good success. Met not too long ago with Association of General Contractors. Sounds like they're still picking these people or individuals up as they are released and putting them to work. So hopefully that's still working out good. Any additional comments there?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, we have fantastic higher ed partners, and I mean that. All those local community colleges and a couple 4-year schools that are in there, they just are there. They're trying to help these folks, and you combine that with our private industry partners who are also they just want to help people. Of course, they've got a business to run, but there's also that heart for trying to help people. You combine those two, it's just phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. We're very excited about the work that's being done in both areas.
I appreciate all the work you put into it. I've seen the change over the years. So thank you, Chair.
Representative Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Um, I just had one question, kind of caught me. Do you or do you not have a system-wide Wi-Fi or broadband in the facilities now, or is that still a work in progress?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I believe we have our Wi-Fi system. If it's not up in every one of our facilities, it's about to be up. So when we started the project about 2.5, 3 years ago, we had some limited Wi-Fi for staff, and it was predominantly in like our administration buildings at our facilities, not down in the housing areas, the work units. Um, so we've expanded that to virtually everywhere in the facility for staff so they can be mobile, be more efficient, be more effective. And then we've pushed out a Wi-Fi for our residents, two separate Wi-Fi systems. They're not on the same system. That could be a potential problem, but we have a separate Wi-Fi for our residents so they can take that tablet that our vendor has for them, and they can send text messages to their families. They can look at their account, order their canteen. They're going to be able to forward a concern form to us about an issue, file a grievance. They can do their education work in there, do their homework, a little bit of entertainment on those tablets. So that Wi-Fi, if it's not 100% in all of our facilities yet, it will be pretty soon. We've had some delays, as you can imagine, with equipment. The supply chain delayed us quite a while on that, but we're almost up everywhere, if not up everywhere today.
And that would include the facility at Winfield, correct?
Yes, that would include Winfield as well.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you.
Representative Resman. We can go to Representative Bloom.
Thank you, Chairman Avery. Good afternoon, sir. If you replace the Hutchinson Correction Facility, will it be still in Hutchinson?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, that would be our intent. We have quite a bit of property there, quite a bit of ground right nearby, and we would keep it there in Hutchinson. That'd be our intent. We're very, very much supported in the Hutchinson community, and we appreciate that. Very much part of it.
Representative Resman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just went off of a question from Representative Bloom. So if that was to go forward, what would be the funding mechanism? Would it be similar to what happened in Lansing?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I neglected to mention that, and I appreciate you raising it. Now, the governor's recommendation is to just pay that off. Just build it, pay for it as we build it, and be done with it. Not to finance it as we did Lansing.
On the education piece, where you have like 66% people serve 5 years or less, or 47% less than 2 years. When it comes to education, how do you decide who is going to get into a program? If some of them are only serving 2 years, and let's say a certification program is 3 years, how do you determine who's going to get into a program?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, so there's a multi-layered response, the best I can do. So if somebody had 2 years left to do on their time with us, and they wanted to get in a certification program that took 3 years, if we knew they were going to release, but we knew or had great confidence that they could release like into community and finish that in the community, especially with Pell, that could just translate later on. Then we could get them enrolled in the program. If there's not much chance of that, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to get them too far into it. It really is so part of it is our capacity to deliver the programs to everybody, having enough space, having enough instructors and whatnot. Our capacity is not where it needs to be today. We have more of a demand than a capacity. So today it's mostly a triage. Who's getting out on who's closest to a release date needs this. Let's get them in and get them prepared. And then everybody else who really wants it, needs it, is kind of behind them in line until they get a little closer.
In your projection, you show that the prison population is going to be going up in years to come. And that's the way it looks right now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but are you anticipating the number of staff you're going to need to meet that increase in population? Just to be on the safe side that if it does go up, are you going to be able to, because I notice you have physical beds at 10,400, and then you have staff beds at 9,800. And
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's what it is. That's what it is today. So yes, that's why our efforts to do recruitment, improve recruitment and retention. We have the positions to fill that 10,400. We have the FTEs, if you will. We just don't have the bodies. We don't have the people. So we're making a very strategic effort to not only recruit, but retain our staff. And again, pay and benefits are helping us with that. You see that in our numbers. Our staffing vacancies are going down. But we'll have to continue that effort. It's getting better, but we're not out of the woods. If by chance circumstances change and we're not able to staff it, then we need to have another conversation about, are we back to some out of state moves, contracting some beds out of state? Is there some sentencing reform that can make a difference? And those projections are from the Kansas Sentencing Commission. So they bring a group of folks together, and I pay them a compliment. The Sentencing Commission is pretty accurate. Traditionally, they've been like within 1.5%, 2.5% on their predictions, which is helpful for all of us in planning. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that they'll be wrong this time and it won't grow that fast. But we'll just keep an eye on it.
I have two questions, but I'm going to combine them into one. A couple of years ago, I know there was a big issue with vehicles. Have you rotated those vehicles that are no longer needed or that don't run? Have they been, gotten rid of from the fleet? And the other thing too is I know equipment was the same thing, where you're rotating to get better equipment for the officers. Is that still on schedule?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you for your question. So we're in a much better shape than we were 5 years ago. I can remember standing in front of the budget committee, and we had, and I'll just use vehicles for a moment. We had a request for, I think, 1.2 or 1.3 million to replace vehicles. We had 60 some vehicles on that list because literally we had vehicles. Our staff would tell me they either crossed themselves or they crossed their fingers before they hopped in them. 250,000 miles. Some of them, the floorboards were rusted out. You could literally see the highway. Well, we had to do something about that. We had not had a vehicle funded for replacement in over 10 years. Yeah, at least 10 years prior to that. Someone on the budget committee asked, well, how come you don't have a vehicle replacement schedule? Well, we used to, but it never got funded. So we quit asking. Today, I'm happy to say the last 4 years, governor's recommended, legislators funded, and now we have a built-in budget item to replace a certain amount of vehicles and a certain amount of equipment like firearms, radios, vests. It's in our budget, it's in our base, and we are systematically, whether it's 20 or 25% every year, we're replacing them. So we're in much better shape with our vehicles, much better shape with our weapons, radios, all that stuff, much better. That investment has been made, and we're in much better condition.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your testimony today and sticking around. And I know you and your team are always happy to answer questions if they arise. So thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our informational briefing from Community Corrections.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Randy Regier. I'm the Director of Reno County Community Corrections and the President of the Kansas Community Corrections Association. Thank you for allowing us this time to talk to you about some of the successes and challenges we're seeing in Kansas in community corrections. Similar slide to what you just saw from Secretary Zamuda. So it's familiar to all of you, but I want to briefly review the field supervision system in Kansas. There's 3 agencies performing supervision of people who've been convicted of a felony. First is Court Services. They supervise people convicted of misdemeanor and people convicted of a felony and are assessed as low to moderate risk. Court Services under the Office of Judicial Administration, and they are state employees. Community corrections is the next level and is someone's last chance before being sent to prison. The people we supervise have a higher risk of reoffending and score moderate to very high on a risk assessment tool. Community corrections is funded through grants from the Department of Corrections to counties. We are county employees rather than state employees. The counties we work for set our pay scale and determine our insurance costs. The local counties, in collaboration with our advisory boards, help direct the focus of our agencies and set the policies and goals we work towards. State parole is the third group of field supervision. Primarily, the people they supervise have served a period of time in prison and have been released back to the community. Parole staff are state employees like court services staff. The distinction between state and county employees becomes particularly important when state employees are given a raise, but funding isn't increased for community corrections grants. Community corrections agencies can't give similar raises to stay competitive with without additional funding. These pay differences can make a difference when it comes to keeping well-trained, knowledgeable staff. Community corrections is only funded to supervise people with felony conviction. The Department of Corrections reported in 2022 that 37% of the people we supervised were assigned for a drug offense, 24% for a person crime, less than 2% of which were sex offenses, and about 16% were property crimes. The remaining 23% were a mix of different convictions. While only 37% specifically had a drug conviction, a much higher percentage are addicted to substances. Substance abuse is one of the primary issues officers work to address while with those on supervision. Another primary issue is mental illness. We're supervising more and more people who are diagnosed as being severely and persistently mentally ill. Some people with mental illness use illegal substances to cope with their symptoms or prior traumatic life events. It's not unusual for them to then have contact with law enforcement and subsequently enter the criminal justice system. Judges often recognize these underlying issues, and rather than sentence a person to prison, they place him on supervision with the goal of getting them the services they need. These clients can take a lot of time and resources for our agencies. We're often taking people to treatment or mental health appointments, paying for services and medications, and in some cases paying for food and housing as well. This kind of work is happening more and more often as we're getting people with ever increasing needs. These are very needy clients. These very needy clients don't need to be incarcerated, but officers have too high of caseloads. They don't have the time to provide assistance and prevent people from ending back up in front of the courts. The work of a community corrections officer is primarily to focus on addressing criminal thinking and behavior with people they supervise. We can refer people for mental health and substance abuse professionals for those needs, but our job is to address criminality. Early in supervision, officers complete risk needs assessments and then work with each client to develop a case plan for addressing areas in their life that are likely to lead to future criminal behavior. This is the deep, difficult work. Most of the people we supervise have 20 plus years of bad training. For many of them, criminality is multi-generational. Most of their family and friends have been or are currently involved in the criminal justice system. We have the difficult task of teaching people a new way of thinking, not just changing how they act. We need to teach them how to think differently about the situations they encounter, the people they associate with, how they see the conventional lifestyle, and even how they think about themselves. Change is difficult for them, just like it is for you, to start engaging in behavior that you found repulsive or irrational. When you dig into the difficult jobs officers have, it starts to make sense why caseload sizes matter so much. Officers are continually pressed with data entry demands, clients who are high needs, and the pressure to change the thinking and behavior of people who are at high risk to reoffend. Officers don't have the time to meet all of these requirements. There are about 155 community corrections officers across the state. Based on the recommended caseload sizes, we need an additional 51 officers. For many agencies, they've had to reduce the number of staff they have as costs have increased, but grant funding has remained flat. Prior to the funding increase we received in the last quarter of FY22, there have been 9 years of flat or reduced funding for personnel. The additional funding was restricted that we did receive in FY22 was only for certain wage increases. This was very helpful for some agencies, but unusable for others. When caseloads are too high, officers deviate from evidence-based practices and spend less time working to address criminal thinking. Their time is taken up with dealing with client crisis and the paperwork and data entry, and don't spend time doing the hard work of addressing criminality. Research has shown that the relationship between an officer and client significantly impacts outcomes. We need officers to invest in these relationships rather than rush through appointments with probationers. Here's a chart with some rough numbers showing how officers spend their week. When caseloads are high, officers have to find things to cut to stay within their 40-hour week. Time spent on things like documentation, data entry, court hearings, and training can't be cut. These are things that are required. The only places officers really can cut is the time they spend with people on probation. So the really important work we want officers to be doing is what's getting cut. Less time spent with clients working on behavior change increases the likelihood of future criminal behavior and drug use. Less time on treatment referrals and verifications results in worse outcomes. Fewer residence verifications and less drug testing means people aren't being held accountable. All this results in the reduced likelihood of real behavior change and an increased likelihood of recidivism and revocations to prison. This graph shows the actual cost for a mid-sized agency between 2013 and 2023. 20 years ago, a typical drug test included looking for meth, cocaine, and marijuana. Now, a typical drug test detects 13 different drugs, and that's not even enough. Communication methods are changing too. Many agencies are expanding to the use of text messaging and electronic appointment reminders to improve communication with clients and reduce technical violations. Fuel and other travel expenses are also increasing. Officers need to be out in the field checking on people they supervise. However, as these costs increase, agencies have had to reduce spending somewhere. Doing more with less has transitioned into just doing less. Accurate drug testing and officers being out in the field is all part of good intensive supervision, but these practices are being compromised because of the lack of funding. Let me help justify why spending more money to supervise people convicted of felonies makes sense. Primarily, community corrections is a cost avoidance tool. Community corrections saves the state a lot of money. Last year, Secretary Zamuda said it costs over $100 per day to house a person in prison, but it costs less than $10 per day to supervise someone with community corrections. Not only does it save money, it also is an investment in people. Rather than a person being a drain on the state's resources, the person is moving towards working, supporting their family, and becoming a contributing member of the community. Let me throw a few more numbers at you. The 5-year success rate for community corrections is 72.1%. We're the only supervision agency whose funding is actually tied to our success rate. Many of the people we supervise are presumptive prison at sentencing, and the judge has to depart from the sentencing guidelines to place them with us. Even with this population who should be sentenced directly to prison, we have had a 69% success rate in FY20. That was 1,037 people who the sentencing guidelines say should have gone to prison, but were successfully diverted from incarceration. Community corrections maintains its focus on public safety. We're still going to recommend the people who are a danger to the community be incarcerated if they're not willing to make changes. But the majority of the people we supervise with our assistance and intensive supervision are able to make the needed changes to be successful in the community. We've worked closely with Secretary Zamuda to develop an enhanced funding request we believe will be reasonable, responsible, and enhance public safety. Based on the caseloads, we need 51 additional officers statewide. Rather than trying to achieve this in 1 year, we're asking for an additional $1.5 million for FY25 to start funding these positions. Breaking this up into 3 years allows us more time to find, hire, and train these officers. We're also asking for $3.5 million to increase and improve services for people on supervision. Each jurisdiction has different needs and different interventions available in their community. Community Corrections works with their advisory boards and county commissions to develop their budget, all within the constraints of the Department of Corrections guidelines. This money will allow stakeholders the opportunity to determine and focus on what services and interventions are most needed in their community. Governor Kelly's budget has included an increase of $2.5 million for community corrections grants for next year. While we are very thankful for this support, I feel it does not meet the need in your communities. When $1 million for client interventions is divided out between 31 judicial districts and nearly 8,000 probationers, it really doesn't go very far. This chart shows an estimated amount the community corrections agencies will receive in each of your jurisdictions. It also shows the additional amount per probationer per year. For Sedgwick County, it comes down to about $149 per probationer for an entire year. For Johnson County, it's only about $74 per probationer. And remember, this is after 11 years of flat funding for client services. I believe our request for $3.5 million for client services is very conservative, especially in light of our rising costs and the alternative costs of incarceration. On behalf of the people and the community corrections agencies in your community, I would ask that you support Secretary Zamuta's full budget enhancement request of $5 million for community corrections. Thank you again for allowing me this time to talk to you about community corrections. Feel free to reach out to Stuart Little or myself if you have questions after today. I've also included a QR code which links to the Department of Corrections website map for community corrections agencies. It will give you the contact information for the community corrections agencies across the state so you can easily contact staff in your own jurisdictions. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you for your testimony today. Any questions from the committee? Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sure I already know this answer, but I'll word it this way. Do you have officers knocking down your door to get jobs?
No, sir. Our current problem, though, is I would be happy to have that problem. But at this point, I don't have the money to even advertise. So since I can't even advertise, I can't even deal with the problem of trying to find the staff.
And you did say you were 51 officers short. Is that what?
Correct, statewide.
Statewide. Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, sorry for going long today, but it was a lot of good information. I know when the first initial calendar came out, agenda for this week, we were not meeting tomorrow, but we will be in committee tomorrow. So just FYI, the revised agenda is on the website. We will see you tomorrow.